Cryptotrader is proudly brought to you by eToro. Discover a simpler way to trade and invest in cryptocurrencies and more.
Day one of Crypto Week in New York City, and the first event is called Fluidity Summit, hosted by AirSwap. All the big names in crypto here, including Mike Novogratz and Joseph Lubin. We promised to keep you covered all week, so let's get started. Crypto Week in New York City, and we're at the Fluidity Summit. I managed to get Joseph Lubin just off the stage after a heated debate. Joseph, you're one of the co-founders of Aetherium. Give us some background. How did you get involved in Ethereum?
So I've been tracking the Bitcoin space. It wasn't really working in the Bitcoin space, but reading absolutely everything for quite a while. I was living in Jamaica, quasi playing around in the music industry. I'm from Toronto. Vitalik Buterin, who invented Ethereum, is from Toronto. And so about a month after he wrote the white paper describing the Ethereum platform, I met him and we spoke, and I read his white paper that night, and I jumped in fully. So by the end of that month, I and many people essentially helped to organize the Ethereum project around Vitalik.
What are the biggest challenges that Ethereum is facing today?
So challenges, I think they're all good ones. I think the onslaught of interest, so many developers are coming into the space right now. It's about 40 times larger in terms of the size of the developer community compared to the second largest one, which is IBM's Fabric. On the technological side, we've traded scalability, the number of transactions per second on systems. We traded what we can do on the internet, which is millions per second in some applications, for this new trust.
So that's the big criticism to Ethereum, is that they've been too slow to become scalable. So it's a great platform and developers are developing great smart contract applications, but too slow to scale. When can we expect some kind of scaling?
That's like criticizing Tim Berners-Lee when he invented the web, that we don't have e-commerce yet, or interactivity on web pages or mobile or social yet. It takes time to build these things. Ethereum is an astonishingly successful platform. It's version 1.
Is scalability a big challenge? Do you guys at Ethereum believe that that has to be solved pretty quickly?
Absolutely, yeah. So we're building systems. So Ethereum is much more scalable than other systems right now, other blockchain systems. Ethereum processes twice as many transactions per day as all the other blockchain systems in the world, and it does so for less money than all the other transaction payments. And so it's already a remarkably advanced technology on the blockchain side of things, but it's version 1. We are building side channels technology, or state channels technology that enables essentially an infinite number of transactions to be organized and then finalized on the blockchain. You can have any sort of off-blockchain activity. There's technology called Plasma that enables you to build a whole blockchain system fit for purpose for an application, maybe thousands of transactions per second. You embed that in the smart contract on Ethereum, and that gives the people using that system the security so that if something goes wrong on that system, they can pull their money out of that system. So they get the full security of the radically decentralized Ethereum architecture.
That's great. Now let's change the discussion to the mining algorithm, or the mining of Ethereum. Today you guys are on proof of work. We've been talking about moving to proof of stake. When will that happen?
So there's code that's pretty close to finalized right now. It's being looked at by auditors. The first phase is all about finality. So it's an overlay system, a proof of stake overlay system. It'll enable the proof of work miners to keep going. They'll get paid a little less for securing the network because it'll be easier to secure the network because of this proof of stake overlay.
Now, why Why is it so important to move off proof of work to proof of stake?
Proof of work is a remarkable invention, but it's incredibly wasteful of electricity, of computation, of hardware. You have to build or buy specialized hardware, and it's turned Bitcoin especially, but Ethereum also, into a hardware arms race. Proof of stake replaces all of that waste with a security bond in the form of Ether on a smart contract, so anybody can do that sort of thing. If you don't have enough Ether, you can send your money to a pool and they'll do that for you, so anybody will be able to participate. It democratizes the ability to get on these networks, validate these networks, and make a little bit of money for your efforts.
And then the critics who keep saying that mining is centralized will probably say that mining has become less centralized.
Yeah, so the barrier to entry drops. You don't need these big farms, and anybody will be able to do it from a phone if they want to.
Let's talk about regulation. Ethereum's been in the spotlight a lot, specifically whether Ethereum is a security or not a security. Where do you stand with regulation?
So we spend a lot of time talking to regulators around the world, definitely including in this country. On the securities front, we will issue tokenized securities. The securities will become programmable, so they're going to be very interesting ways of issuing shares in companies. We will issue utility tokens or consumer tokens that provide membership on a platform, consumer access to something, consumption of shared resources. These protocol-based open platforms, these networked systems, will be a new way of delivering services to consumers, and we're very confident that we understand how to do that without regulatory bodies considering those kinds of token securities.
So you're of the opinion that today there's no chance that Ethereum can be deemed a security?
Oh, so with respect to Ether, now we did our legal homework a long time ago. We delayed our token launch for about 7 months. Ether was never considered a cryptocurrency. We always considered it a fuel, one of the first crypto commodities, yeah, something like that. And essentially because people are donating their resources, it started out quite decentralized. It was in a context in which there were nobody had heard the term ICO. It wasn't an ICO, we called it a token launch. It was sold very explicitly to software developers, to people who intended to use the system. It was not sold for speculative purposes. We're very confident that it started decentralized and people bought it for those reasons, and that it has grown radically decentralized and never was a security and certainly isn't now.
So let's put last year behind us. Last year was the ICO year. Everybody used Ethereum ERC20 tokens as ICO mechanisms. 2018, what do you believe the theme of 2018 around Ethereum is going to be?
The release of really interesting applications, foundational applications. There's so many projects building out foundational components like a price stable token or an atomic swap mechanism for tokens or a name registry or a bounty system or an identity system. So all of these things are going to get combined by really smart entrepreneurs into systems that connect content creators to consumers or resource or service providers to consumers without intermediaries in the middle. So we're seeing that on a lot of our projects. We have Ujo Music that's linking musicians to consumers directly. They're selling music on the platform. It's in beta right now.
And bypassing the middleman and giving the money and giving the money back to the artists. Let's talk about 3 or 4 of your favorite projects that you know are being built on the Ethereum network today. If I were to ask you 3 or 4 of your favorite ones, which ones are they?
Yeah, so Ujo Music is a great one. There's a price stable token called Maker. The token's called DAI. I think there's north of $1 billion of value in that. The price of Ether has been volatile over the last little while. It's been rock solid at $1 US. It's enabling commerce, on the Ethereum network. We have a project, this is a supply chain project, a project that is track and trace. It's delivering sushi to our ethereal event, which is happening tomorrow and Saturday. So we have an application we're tracking, and it's a World Food Program project.
Now, if you look around at the landscape today, everybody's developing new blockchains, and a lot of times Ethereum is compared to things like EOS or Hashgraph.
No, I think EOS is compared to Ethereum.
EOS is compared to Ethereum, and Hashgraph is compared to everyone. Do you sometimes look at other blockchains and think, we may be in trouble if these guys get it right?
No.
No?
No. So there's some projects in our space that are focused on building the best technology, sharing the truth about the different trade-offs of decentralization versus scalability and security, and there are other projects that are focused on marketing. The Ethereum project has so much activity, so much network effect. For every project like pure functional programming on Tezos, we have 11 of those projects. So the network effect is astonishing, and the project is agile. So there are technologies built somewhere else, like ring signatures and ZK snarks for privacy. Vitalik goes home and he does a little proof of concept, and the software developers that are building out the many Ethereum clients that implement the protocol, they put it into the protocol and absorb those technologies.
People talk about ERC 721 as being its own ecosystem and being a huge ecosystem for Ethereum.
I think it's going to be big, yeah. So we're already 40 times larger than the second largest developer community in the world, IBM's Fabric, and I expect that to increase.
Certainly sounds very exciting, sounds like a very vibrant community, so stay tuned. Today at the Fluidity Summit, Jihan Chu gave a talk about Crypto Asia and how important it is. Jihan, Crypto Asia. Why is Asia such an important region?
I think that Asia really serves as kind of the engine of the entire blockchain industry at the moment. I would say that from a trading perspective, what we notice is that the top 5 exchanges by volume in the world are all in Asia. In addition, 10 of the top 20 projects from a trading perspective, those coins are all either Asia teams, or Asia related heavily.
So, but why? What has Asia done different that has made it this empire for crypto that the West hasn't done?
I think from a cultural perspective, there is a bit of a trade mentality which I think helps things along and really facilitates. But even from a structural perspective, we've seen that a regulatory stance in Asia, in Japan, how they've opened up to ICOs. In Korea, despite a kind of a mini ban, they're really starting to open up. Hong Kong remains a really strong jurisdiction for ICOs and token generating events, as well as Singapore. China, despite the overall ban, we see as going to be opening up, and when they open up, it'll be in a big way. So all these kind of factors come together.
I've always said I'm willing to talk doom and gloom as long as the people know what they're talking about and they can justify what they're talking about with the facts. My next speaker, Ryan Sulcus, he just got off the stage and he is talking doom and gloom about ICOs. Ryan, why the doom and gloom?
I wouldn't say that I'm all doom and gloom, but with any new technology, you tend to have hype cycles, and we're in the very beginning of the hype cycle around crypto assets and tokens. So I think it's a little bit overvalued, but there's still projects that are going to make it out the other side okay.
So now you talk about the very early stage of crypto, of hype cycles, and we all know the chart that goes like this and comes down, and it's always referenced when the markets are going down. Where are we on that chart?
I still think that most assets in the industry are overvalued by 99%. I mean, orders of magnitude, and for no other reason than you don't need to hold some of these tokens. I tend to think of things in 3 categories, 3 buckets. There's cryptocurrencies, which are either going to be worth trillions or nothing. On the other side of the barbell, there's crypto securities, which basically use this new technology as an enabling technology, but still follow the same valuation rules as traditional assets. And then there's this new bucket of utility tokens, which no one really knows how to value, so that's what we're seeing in the market right now.
So let's talk specifically around utility tokens. What are the big problems in utility tokens today?
The big problem I think I just said is no one really knows how to value these things. And I wouldn't say that you should value every single utility token the same way. There are different categories. So for instance, there are certain staking tokens and certain assets like Numerai or Augur, where you must hold the token in order to stake it and ultimately earn network fees that are generated by the protocol. If you contrast that with something like a token curated registry, which is what I just talked about, you look at a token curated registry and you're trying to assess what the intrinsic value of a certain information resource is. There are no earnings necessarily that come around with that, but there are certain information resources, particularly credentials of all kinds, that do have real-world value. And if you think about the governance of a credentialing body in a decentralized manner, what is it worth to be one of the curators? What is it worth to have a say in the credentialing of a new person, company?
So you're talking about a Wikipedia of tokens in essence, where people can come in and contribute information about tokens. What kind of information are we looking at?
So Messari is building an open source data library that anybody can access freely to get information on the universe of token projects, and that has everything from who are the teams, what are the incentives for the advisors and investors and the founding teams, what is the token supply, what are the economics around a given token, and how do those change over time. In addition, what are the resources that are currently available to users or investors in the system.
Now, anyone can contribute? Does the company contribute? What's the...
Well, the company's 4 months old, so we're taking baby steps. We released our alpha today called Agora, and the platform has 80 of our volunteer analysts contributing information. In addition, they've created 25 tear sheets on a number of different assets from Filecoin and 0x and Aragon and a number of other high-profile projects. In the future, that will get much larger. We'll open up the library and the permissions to a much broader community, but right now, we're keeping it tight.
So in the future, will I be able to contribute information on a token? Will I be able to access information and post it on this Wikipedia or Messari?
Absolutely, but it'll work just like Crunchbase or Wikipedia does today. Your contribution might not necessarily get accepted.
Does this replace regulation? Is this the self-regulation that everyone's talking about? If we do this, will we keep the SEC off our backs?
Well, it's one angle. And I think if you look at Chairman Clayton's comments back in November, he actually laid out a path for the industry to start self-regulating a bit more just via transparency. And this is essentially that. Yeah, I don't think it's the full solution, but it's certainly a step in the right direction. And projects that voluntarily disclose some of this key information are certainly coming a little bit closer into compliance with the spirit of existing laws, if not the letter.
Okay, now you launched today. Can the public view the site? Or where can they view it?
Messari.io. If you visit our research tab, we have 25 token profiles, adding about 1 to 2 each day. Agora is the new crowdsourced data library where you'll be able to track projects and companies and people in the space. And then finally, our white paper is available for public comment, and we look forward to hearing back from folks on that.
Great, so if you want more information, that's Messari.io. It looks like an amazing platform to give us information, and maybe the first step towards self-regulation. Today's been all about the Ethereum Summit, and we're just about to pack up and go home, but I managed to grab Vlad off the stage. Vlad, for our viewers who don't know who you are, a little bit of insight as to how you got involved in Ethereum.
Oh, sure. So, I mean, I met Vitalik in like April or March 2014, and I participated in a hackathon and built an Ethereum app, or like I built the front end for an Ethereum app. My buddy built the back end. And then that's how we kind of landed these like volunteer positions with what would become the Ethereum Foundation.
And so what are you doing today?
I'm working on consensus protocols,
okay,
like blockchain scaling and efficiency and proof of stake and sharding.
What would you define as the biggest challenges that Ethereum faces today?
Governance of blockchains, and with the question of like, how useful will they be in general? Like how scalable will they be? What are the limits on the usability and the technical trade-offs?
We've been talking about scalability for a long time. Is 2018 going to be the year where we can become real-world scalable?
Well, I mean, probably not. I think 2018 is going to be the year that like if they're lucky, a small number of projects that like have some kind of crappy scaling solution, my opinion, will launch something. Hopefully we'll see like a real blockchain scaling solution in 2018, but I doubt it. I think it's still going to be a little more time than that.
In the Ethereum stable, what are the initiatives that are going to bring up around scaling? What are you most hopeful for that will make the Ethereum network certainly more scalable?
I mean, I'm most optimistic about sharding, but in the short term, I think like there's a chance that like other things, other off-chain mechanisms like state channels or side chains, or something in between like Plasma.
Now, what do you have to say when we talk about other chains? They're talking about chains like EOS, which are promising huge transactions.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think it's kind of a mistake to imagine that a blockchain is just the tech. A blockchain is really a community and an ecosystem of people who are governing and using a consensus protocol that's actually like running in the wild. And so I don't think you can like just by solving a tech solution really solve blockchain for everyone.
They're pretty vocal about the fact that when they come online, EOS comes online, they're going to, you know, put Ethereum out of business. They're going to make Ethereum obsolete.
But it's nonsense.
Justify that.
Well, the blockchain isn't just tech, right? I mean, you have to ask, like, who are EOS? Like, why are they there? What is their community? What are they doing? Like, what's their ethos? What's their purpose? Like, what, like, you know, what are the processes by which they govern the blockchain? Like, are what, like, you know, the ecosystem that they have is basically, as far as I can tell, non-existent. And that counts for a lot. It takes a long time to build an ecosystem.
If we look at the Ethereum ecosystem, very successful ecosystem, big developer community, you've got the Ethereum Foundation, and that kind of brings us onto the topic of governance today. So how would you summarize the way that Ethereum is governed today? There are a lot of critics that say that it's centralized. It's centralized within the foundation, that there are many people that have too much of a say, maybe even including Vitalik. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, most people think that primarily because they aren't really participating in the processes, and they're not really that aware of the kind of processes and checks and balances that we have. And I think really, for the most part, these people, like at least in the industry, are advocating for centralized governance models anyways.
What does the governance structure look like today?
Oh, well, we have you know, this off-chain governance process where node operators decide whether to install software that's made by various teams of developers and various software repositories, and those developers coordinate with each other through two main kind of processes that we have. An EAP process, which is an improvement proposal process, which is a technical review process for proposals, and we have this all devs call where developers meet every 2 weeks and come to consensus on the short-term release schedule.
And who runs the call?
So the call is facilitated by an Ethereum Foundation person, and they, you know, do their best and an admirable job really of being neutral and being a facilitator.
So for the critics out there, you're saying that Ethereum is decentralized?
Well, I mean, there's no way that Vitalik could decide things unilaterally. There's basically a political process that needs to drive governance, because the developers aren't going to ship anything that they don't think people will use. People aren't going to adopt anything without thinking about it, especially if it's something contentious or something where it's not just like a technical maintenance, but something that people understand and has a significant impact. Like, for example, the DAO hack, or
well, that was probably the last real disagreement in the community, right? And that's what caused the Ethereum versus Ethereum Classic split.
Well, it was the only example that we have of a change happening without consensus
in the Ethereum community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that, you know, and it was super, and it's a super interesting thing, right? Because you know, and we saw the Bitcoin community somewhat in a very different way with Bitcoin Cash, where Bitcoin Cash was kind of a very like a minority fork that was relatively successful.
Yes.
And whereas we had a majority fork that was relatively successful, in the sense that like both forks continue to survive after.
Yeah.
Oh, speaking of Bitcoin Cash, it's a good example from our earlier conversation. They have like big blocks, but they're empty.
Yes.
EOS is going to have the same situation. No one's going to use it because it's not going to be usable, and they're not. And even if they do use it, it doesn't mean that they have like an ecosystem that you want to be a part of.
Now let's talk about another one that's promising big transaction volumes, and that's Hashgraph.
Oh man, Hashgraph. Yeah.
What do you
it's you know, one of the consensus protocols that I don't like totally hate, although like I think that my consensus protocol that I work on I like better, and we do a lot of it. We make some similar decisions, namely the hash graph kind of, or like the message, the arbitrary DAG structure.
Yeah.
I'm into the arbitrary DAG consensus protocols, but I don't like certain things about Hashgraph. And, you know, I mean, it's hard for me to like any project that's working on these problems because I work on them myself, you know.
What are you excited about that's coming onto the chain in 2018? Are you excited about any projects that you know are being developed? I mean, surely you must have some projects.
I'm excited about decentralized exchanges. I'm excited about that.
What excites you about decentralized exchanges?
I think it's really cool. I think like the idea that we can reduce the number of counterparties that we have in transactions is one of the reasons that we have to think that blockchains will actually be useful in an economic sense. I like 0x as like an idea, but I'm not enough in the space to like, be an expert. Although I have worked a little bit on exchange architecture, but it's just like a very like a side project. Where I'm really like expert is like the consensus protocols stuff.
Okay, so last question before we let you go. Is 2018 the year of the flippening? Is Ethereum going to be bigger than Bitcoin at the end of the year?
I don't want to speculate, and I definitely don't want to speculate on this, yeah.
Great. Vlad, it's been amazing having you on.
Cheers.
Such an honor. Thank you very much.
Every one of you should be getting active politically, writing your legislators in Washington about the SEC issues and working with local groups at your state level.
So this week's been all about Ethereum. We've just come out of the Ethereum Summit, but it's not all about Ethereum. And in fact, some people think that there may be some Ethereum killers out there. Kingsley, you believe it is some Ethereum killers out there. Who are they?
Yeah, so there's a new wave of blockchains that have the potential to dethrone Ethereum. So firstly, we've got Oasis, which is a new blockchain led by Dawn Song, who's a leading cryptography researcher out of University of Berkeley. So their blockchain has 600 times greater throughput, 400 times lower latency, and 1,000 times lower transaction fees than Ethereum.
So how many transactions per second are we talking about?
So we're talking thousands of transactions per second. To give you some perspective, Ethereum is about 10 to 15 transactions per second at the moment. But really, to scale up to worldwide use cases, we need to get to hundreds of thousands and millions of transactions per second.
A blockchain is not all about the technology. It's also about the development team. And no one's got a big enough development community that can match the number of developers that are developing on Ethereum.
So Ethereum does have the biggest developer community in blockchain at the moment. It will be a challenge for new blockchains to get the same adoption that Ethereum has had.
Other than Oasis, who else could take Ethereum out?
Thunder, which is a new blockchain led by Elaine Shi, who's a world-leading cryptographer out of Cornell University. They have a novel proof-of-stake consensus mechanism.
Who else could disrupt Ethereum?
So Zilliqa is a new project out of National University of Singapore, and it's the first blockchain to implement sharding.
So they use sharding, and sharding essentially means that they break up the transactions into smaller pieces. Ethereum's talking about implementing sharding. When is Ethereum going to implement sharding?
So Vitalik recently released an update to sharding, so they will release their project in different stages.
So you're talking about 3 projects that may really disrupt Ethereum. You're talking about Oasis, you're talking about Thunder, and you're talking about Zilliqa. Who's going to win the race?
It's too hard to tell at the moment who will win the race. The blockchain that also has the technical prowess as well as the developer adoption will ultimately win.
Wow, those are really some big statements, and I wonder if Ethereum can actually be disrupted. I want to hear from you. Do you think Ethereum can be disrupted? If you do, get me on my Twitter @CryptoManRun and tell me who you think is going to disrupt Ethereum. I'm CryptoManRun, and the next time you see me, I'll be at Consensus right over here. Until next week, trade well, my friends.
Cryptotrader is proudly brought to you by eToro. Discover a simpler way to trade and invest in cryptocurrencies and more.